I'm Christoph Kleine. I'm a professor for the history of religions at the Institute for the Study of Religions at Leipzig University. And at the same time, I'm co-director of this research group, Multiple Secularities, Beyond the West, Beyond Modernities. And at ReCentGlobe, I'm the spokesperson, co-speaker of the research area 3 and deputy director of the ReCentGlobe Center. I think the first thing that needs to be explained is what do we mean by secularity, because this is a very tricky concept, actually. And we use secularity as a term that denotes a certain way of conceptualizing social differentiation, meaning that every society in global modernity knows some form of distinction between the religious and the secular. And in many cases, this is even laid down in constitutions. You see it in law, in politics, and in all areas of society, that people make a distinction between religion and the secular. And at the same time, we have observed that there are various ways in which people draw the boundaries between the religious and the secular. And this has legal consequences, political consequences. And the ways in which these boundaries are drawn are often very contested. So there are many conflicts throughout the world over the question to which degree religion should be fenced in. Should we display religious symbols in the public space, like in classrooms or in courtrooms and so on? So you know all these discussions. And so we observe that there are various ways, multiple ways of organizing the relationship between the religious and the secular. And we observed also that there are many conflicts around these organizations or the modes of regulating this. And so to put it very briefly, in our understanding, secularity is a certain special way to conceptualize social differentiation, which in fact is much more complicated, of course. So, but as soon as people start to create a binary schema saying what is not religious is secular, regardless of whether it's economic or political or related to education or whatever, it's all secular. And this is obviously a religious mode of making distinctions, because no other social system would come up with such a simplified way of conceptualizing social differentiation, which in fact is much more complex, of course. And so this is the basic observation from where we started. And so the question that we're dealing with in this research group is now, why do we have this multiplicity of secularities? Why is it not like, and you may guess that we allude to Shmuel Eisenstadt's concept of multiple modernities here. So why is it that there is not one single concept of secularity throughout the world to which all societies kind of refer, but multiple secularities? And in our understanding, there are historical reasons for that need to be reconstructed. So what are the specific cultural trajectories towards a certain way of distinguishing between religion and the secular, and what conflicts do result out of this special configuration? And so this is an interdisciplinary research group that brings together scholars from all parts of the world and with empirical materials coming from all periods of time in history and from all regions. So it's a very global topic, actually. The Institute for the Study of Religion is actually quite old. It was established in 1912, so Leipzig is the place in Germany with the oldest Institute for the Study of Religions in Germany. But the research center, Multiple Secularities, started in 2016, and it is the outcome of a collaboration between the Institute of Religious Studies and my colleague, the cultural sociologist Monika Wohlrab-Saar. We came together in different contexts, like a graduate school and so on. And we soon realized that we have a whole lot of shared interests, research questions and so on. And secularity was actually one of the points of where our interests kind of conflated, so to speak. And so we thought of designing a project based on this idea, which was originally developed by Monika Wohlrab-Saar and Marian Burchardt, who came up with this concept of multiple secularities, but only focusing on global modernity. And so me as a historian of religion kind of added to that, and we thought that we should do something together and think about a project in which this modern sociological perspective is connected to a historical perspective, which also takes into account non-Western societies. And so my special field of, for instance, is Japan, religious history of Japan. And so we thought this might be a good idea to apply for funding for a so-called Kollegforschungsgruppe, which is a Center of Advanced Studies in the Humanities and Social Sciences. I think that's the original wording. We started as a research group or as a Kollegforschungsgruppe in 2016, and ReCentGlobe was founded afterwards, so it's a later development. But before ReCentGlobe was founded, there were two centers, the Center for Area Studies and the Center for the Study of Religion. So together we kind of created the idea of a research profile called Global Connections and Comparisons. And after a while, we thought that it might be a good idea to kind of build up a more inclusive center for the study of the global condition or global dynamics, as it's called now. And so it was a gradual development. But basically, I mean, the funding and the financial basis is something which is located within the concrete projects, such as the Kollegforschungsgruppe, multiple secularities. But I think ReCentGlobe offers an opportunity for researchers at Leipzig University and beyond to exchange ideas, to come together at certain academic events like workshops and conferences. And we have administrative help to kind of organize these events. And so this helps a lot. But I think the most crucial point is that it brings people together from all sorts of academic backgrounds and disciplines. And so it turned out to be very fruitful to exchange ideas, to design new projects and develop new ideas. And believe it or not, this is a rare opportunity actually at modern universities, because we all experience that we meet our colleagues quite regularly in the everyday life of a university, but we talk about a lot of things, but usually it's about administrative stuff and organizational stuff and so on, but an intellectual exchange beyond the borders of disciplines, that happens quite rarely actually. And ReCentGlobe, I think, is a perfect platform or a forum for intellectual exchange. And so I really appreciate that. Research Area 3 is a relatively new idea, actually. So we designed that because we noticed at a certain point that many of us in the field of religious studies, sociology, and other cultural studies and so on, area studies, that many of us are interested in what we call, alluding of course to Michel Foucault, epistemes. So by epistemes we mean basically the way in which people perceive their world and think how they should act in the world. So it's like a cognitive and normative disposition gain, or which people get by via socialization. And so what we all, and as a scholar or historian of religion, I've always dealt, of course, with what I would call systems of cognitive and normative orientation. That's basically what religions are. They say people how to think about the world, how to think about themselves, and how to act in the world. So that's what their function basically is, or was at least, and still is in many parts of the world. And in order to kind of broaden the perspective, I thought at a certain point we shouldn't just talk about religion, because this specific aspect of religion, providing cognitive and normative orientation and creating what Berger and Luckmann would call a symbolic universe of meaning. This is something which is interesting in itself, and we should open up this for secular perspectives also, because we have ideologies and other kinds of systems of cognitive and normative orientation. And so as a word for that, we use episteme, basically. And what we're interested in, I mean, at Leipzig University in general and in ReCentGlobe in particular, is global dynamics, as you know. So we're dealing with something that happens in the present time, which seems to kind of hint at something which I would call a critical juncture. So it seems that we live in a time which by many people is perceived as something, as a historical break or something, a rupture, or I would call it a critical juncture. And when you look at the reasons for that, there are many reasons, of course, and climate change and all sorts of things. But what interests me most is how people deal with this notion of crisis. So we have multiple crises, obviously, and people react differently to these crises, and they interpret these crises in different ways. And so I think even in the times of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, we witnessed something which could be called an epistemic crisis, which is like a meta-crisis, if you will, that people all of a sudden came up, and in the media and the social media in particular, people came up with completely new interpretations of the situation. And all of a sudden you had the feeling that many parts of the society kind of lack common understanding of the situation. So they interpret the situation in completely different ways, and in such a fragmented way that they even cannot speak to each other anymore reasonably, because they don't share the same basic consensus about facts. And so what some people would call scientific facts, others would call fake news, and they come up with alternative facts. And so the idea that came up in these days was that we witness some form of epistemic fragmentation. And what does that mean for a society when you can't find a consensus about very basic facts in society? And how do some people say there is no such thing as man-made global warming? So how should you deal with these people? I mean, how could there possibly be any reasonable communication at all? And how should politicians react to that? I mean, how can democratic procedures be followed if the basic idea of democracies doesn't function anymore? That there is a epistemic basis on which people kind of argue. So you can have different opinions upon all kinds of things, but if you simply deny what formerly was seen as a fact, how can you base democratic decisions when there's no rational communication anymore in society about particular problems. Put very simply, we're dealing with questions about how are epistemes formed, by whom, and how are they questioned, how are they contested, and are there certain conditions under which epistemes are challenged to such a degree that epistemic change happens, that all of a sudden the mindset of a whole population may change. And so this is the historical part of it. And as a historian of religion, I'm of course interested in heretical movements, for instance, which often were the result of crises. So there was a crisis like droughts or earthquakes, pandemics, epidemics. And it seemed that the epistemic authorities, often religious institutions, didn't have the right answers to kind of tackle with these problems. And as a result, deviant groups came up and questioned the authorities, and in some instances like the Reformation, or let's say in Europe the Enlightenment, it led to quite a dramatic change in the hegemonic epistemes. And so one question would be, are we in such a time right now? So do we have to face a complete rupture in epistemic terms and otherwise? As researchers, we don't see that we are in charge of changing or solving societal problems. But at the same time, we hope that our findings will somehow be picked up by decision makers, politicians, and so on, so that they can base their decisions on what we have learned about how epistemic structures are created or contested and so on. We're probably not the ones who will solve these problems, but I think to solve a problem, you need a proper description of the problem, so and an analysis, and sometimes it also helps to look at history where you have a greater distance to the object. So because we tend to kind of overestimate what happens in our times, so that's the risk we always have to face, that we think everything that happens in our times is so dramatic and so everything is so new and so on. But viewed from some distance, you may realize and compare to historical events, and so you may realize that it's all not that new and that dramatic, and so keep calm, perhaps. But I don't want to downplay the challenges of present times, but I think, and this is of course our hope, that we will contribute to a rational discourse, that we provide information about how structures are created, upheld or challenged, and what factors may lead to radical epistemic changes. And as soon as we know about that, I think we are better equipped, at least, to face these challenges and to cope with the problems. The benefits you get from international cooperation goes well beyond just gathering information from various regions. So cooperation with people and researchers from many parts of the world teaches you so much. Not only, as I said, in terms of they have their own research and so that's interesting and everything. But so what we realized, I mean, to be a little more concrete, is that some of the research questions we ask, like how do we explain the multiplicity of secularities, for instance? Even these questions may not make much sense in other parts of the world. So sometimes it's like an eye-opener when you see, okay, for instance, I work on Japan, but you hardly find anyone in Japan who's interested in the questions we ask. So although it is a highly developed country with a great academic culture and high-ranked universities and everything, but they deal with different problems. And I think this teaches us that our perspective is very limited. And as Europeans or Euro-Americans, we always think that what we do in science or scholarship is universally valid. And I think we need to learn some modesty in that regard and see that, I mean, it is us in the present in a Western European country that asks these questions. And of course, there are others in other European countries and in the US who are interested too, but in many parts of the world, people are, so what's the problem? So we have completely different problems. So speak to Indians, for instance. I would say, okay, that's our problem is not how to draw boundaries between the religious and the secular. Our problem is that secularism as a legal strategy to cope with religious plurality is under attack. So we have to uphold the idea of secularism for the sake of granting rights for all religions, and so we're not dealing with these abstract conceptual problems that you have. So that's not our situation where we find ourselves in. So, and that I think was very fruitful, and you get different perspectives, and people tell you what the academic and the social problems in their countries are, and so this puts your own research agenda somewhat into perspective. I think we have managed in general to kind of be seen internationally as a center of research for, I think, global studies in general, but also, I mean, the multiple secularities project has become well known throughout the world, so which is also due to the sheer number of fellows that we have invited. And this is the good thing about this format of a Kollegforschungsgruppe, that I think, I don't have the exact numbers, but maybe it's 60 or 70 fellows that have come to us. And they take something from us and we take something from them. And what we've experienced is that many of them, first of all, they may at first be a little reluctant to kind of think in our kind of ways of thinking, but after a while they get interested, and they kind of pick up this research perspective, and they go back to their home countries and then think further and bring this perspective into their own academic environments. And so this is a way to kind of spread concepts and scholarly approaches. And I think we've been relatively successful in that regard, so that I do believe that people in the world who work on secularity in one way or the other will usually refer to us, and Leipzig has become a center for research in secularities. Since I've been doing religious studies, people ask me, do you think this has any future? Because in Western Europe, the general perception is that religion is something outdated. It will vanish at a certain point, and but I think everybody has now by now realized that this is not the case. I mean, on the global scale, religion is very much alive and very influential, even more influential than 50 years ago, for instance, in terms of politics and so on. So I'm not afraid that religious studies will die out. So, when it comes to multiple secularities and all the related research agendas that we pursue, like the question of epistemic fragmentation and so on, I'm afraid this will also be something which we have to deal with for quite a while. I mean, some people would claim that we have reached a stage which some people would call post-secularity, a post-secular age in which the distinction between the religious and the secular doesn't matter anymore. It is something that nobody really cares about. And for many parts of Western Europe, that may be true to some extent, that people really don't care if something is religious or secular, so they are indifferent in that regard. But for most parts of the world, this is definitely not true. I mean, it is still a very contested field. So I think that, at least at my age, I don't have to be afraid that this topic will be irrelevant anytime soon. So.